Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Just yesterday, NG Models announced their July set of releases, which will be released no doubt in August. So without further ado, it's time for another ranking video to check out what I think about these models. It's not quite as big a set of releases as last month, where there were 27 releases, but it's still pretty massive, and there are 23 400 scale releases and a 200 scale release, which I'm not going to discuss. So we've got 23 models to get through, and it's quite an interesting batch. And if anything, this month, I think, from NG illustrates why NG are different and arguably better than the rest, in the sense that they have the freedom to produce whatever they like, and they certainly get around. Whereas jcwings don't produce a great deal of non-Asian material, or if they do, it's only stuff not competing with Gemini. If Gemini themselves mainly focus on North America with a sprinkling of other standard airlines like Emirates and British Airways, Phoenix produce mainly Asian stuff with a little bit of European. But NG can produce everything. They're most like Aero Classics, except of course Aero Classics don't have access to the same modern set of molds which appeal to the mass market in the same way that NG do. So it looks like a really diverse set of models, because we've got Europe, North America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, South America, all represented in this set, which is great. Okay, now before I get any further, obviously, as always, subscribe to the video channel and like the video if you enjoy the content. Check out yesterday's airlines.com and my Facebook at yesterairlines and Instagram at yesterairlines. Okay, because I post different material to different channels at different times, and it's well worth having a look. Also, well worth joining 400 Scale in Detail as well, which is a great Facebook group that I run on Facebook, which gets a lot of really good content from myself and other people, so check that out as well. But now on to this month's NG Models releases. NG Models have now got a really impressive set of molds, and there are more coming, and this month they are making good use of that range. And we'll start with some of the new Airbus A320 family molds, because this month there are a trio of Airbus A321s which we can look at. And we'll start with Alaska Airlines, and the aircraft itself is wearing this livery, the More to Love scheme, which, to be honest, isn't a scheme which has really excited me. I have to admit, it's worn by a couple of aircraft in the Alaska fleet, ex-Virgin America aircraft, and I believe this one is N926VA that they are producing this month. It's obviously an Airbus A321 Neo, and what do I think about this? Well, it's interesting that this is probably going to be a super popular release. Alaska is really smack bang in Gemini territory, so I imagine they're spewing. And Gemini have produced this model already themselves. Looking at the pictures of it, it's obviously on the inferior jcwings mold, which has got those huge Neo engines which are outsized. And it does look like they didn't get the colours right, which is a bit weird, because usually Gemini have access to the official colours, but looking at the actual aircraft, it looks like that area in the middle, which is where it blends from kind of the red front to the dark blue back, it just doesn't look correct around the more and the two aspects. So yeah, I don't think that model's really competing, and that was made in 4 years ago now, in 2018. Aero Classics also made the same model. In fact, they made two versions in the same time, and their release equally looks pretty ordinary, because once again the colours aren't correct, though differently. Here Aero Classics has just got too dark, and they've got the wrong winglet colours, and again the mould is inferior too, with the old style Aero Classics nose gear tyres. So So this one is has been made before, which does decrease its interest, but it is, even though I don't like the livery, I'm sure it's going to be a super popular livery. So I think that this one is going to be a high flyer. Obviously, the NG Models A321 molds are really nice that I reviewed recently. So I haven't got any problems with the molds at all, really. I think they look good. Even though I probably prefer the Panda engines to the NG engines, it's not a major thing. Moving on to the second Airbus here, and it is Lufthansa Cargo DAEUC. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get too excited about Lufthansa. To be honest, their scheme is super boring nowadays. They got rid of even more colour. When you thought Lufthansa couldn't make their scheme less interesting than it was already, they did, by getting rid of the belly and getting rid of the yellow or the gold. Yeah, it's hard for me to get excited by this. Again, I'm sure that we find no one else has made the listed Lufthansa cargo scheme, but for me, it's very much, yeah, just a kind of a workhorse model, really. And the last A320 this month is also German, and that is DAIAD, which is unmistakably in the new colours of Condor. Now, this scheme is kind of a love it or hate it scheme. Obviously, they've got different colour variants on the different aircraft. This one's wearing this kind of gold slash orangey kind of colour. Do I like this livery? Yeah, it's not singing to me, I admit. I actually don't mind the stripes, but I can't say that I like the way that they've decreased the size of the tail logo, so it kind of just sneaks in between the stripes on the tail, and the titles are a bit as well. So yeah, the livery's not doing a great deal for me. Again, I think it'll be a really nice model, and it is the first time that anyone has announced this in the scale, and this is one of those instances, I think, where NG is a real bonus for the collector, because jcwings are unlikely to make this model because it's too close to Gemini territory. Gemini themselves are probably unlikely to make it just because they've already got a long backlog of models and they don't make that many a month anyway. And they don't tend to focus on char airlines either. So it's just going to sit there, probably not get made for ages because Phoenix won't go near it. So you're just left with perhaps Aeroclassics at some point making it. And it's just nice to have a reliable manufacturer of new liveries in Europe like this, even if it doesn't fit at all within my collection criteria. So for that reason alone, I think this one's probably a high flyer. Okay, from ultra modern into classic, and that's also another great thing about NG, is that they have this variety of molds which enables the movement between retro and modern aircraft, especially because obviously I like retro schemes. So we've got a pair of Delta TriStars. Delta is absolutely red hot when it comes to 400 scale, and these are going to sell super well. It obviously helps that the NG Models TriStar is fantastic, and there's been a lot of people asking for a re-release of the original TriStar which NG made, and they've come close here to doing that. If you look at the first one of these, then it is effectively the same scheme, the later widget colours on the TriStar, but this time round you can see it is a TriStar 1 or an early version TriStar, whereas the previous model they released was on a TriStar 200, the difference being that this does not have the frisbee fairing fin fillet between the number 2 engine and the fuselage roof. So that is the primary difference here. This is going to be a killer release, especially if NG have resolved their issues with the natural metal bellies, and I kind of get the feeling they probably have. And then, you know, I've got the first TriStar. This one's almost the same, just with that difference that I just mentioned. I'm still going to get it probably because it just is going to be awesome. I think it's a model which is going to sell out super fast and be super valuable in the future. You compare it to the version that's been made by Loch Ness / Aeroclassics, and you can just see that this is going to be so much better. There haven't been that many Delta TriStars made in the scale, interestingly. When you look back through all the models that have been made, there haven't been large numbers. So there have been a couple of really ancient releases by Gemini. In fact, the last time Gemini released a standard TriStar was in 1999. So that's just incredible that it was so long ago. It looks like there was perhaps a Schuko version or one labeled Schuko a bit later, but no, it's been forever, and such an iconic aircraft. So obviously this one's got to be supersonic. And if you thought that scheme was good, then the next scheme is even better, because this one is another Delta TriStar, but this one's wearing the 1976 bicentennial scheme with the modified widget logo on the front. It also has the changed, or the early style, natural metal belly finish, which the TriStars wore, where the natural metal belly doesn't follow the cheat line curve. This one's even more exciting. This is possibly going to be like one of the models of the year. And if you actually also look at the images, you can see that the engines are different on this version of the TriStar 2. It's got the much longer exhaust for the engine, so it's great. Again, NG have the capability to put this kind of detail into their releases, which most others would just ignore. So fabulous, supersonic, obviously. Next up, we've got another Airbus A320 family member. This one's an A319. This one's in the colours of British Airways. It's in their current scheme, and when I say that, obviously there have been different versions of the British Airways Chatham Dockyard scheme over the years. It's not just been one ever since they took up the scheme. This one has got the brilliant white, and it's got the to fly to serve crest after the titles, which is the latest version of the livery. The registration of the aircraft is GDBCK, and that aircraft is one which is not necessarily a standard BA aircraft. If you look at its history, then it was an aeroplane which originally was with British Midland, and so I think quite a few people were hoping this might be a British Midland release. I was probably one of them. I might have got it if it were. I won't be getting a standard British Airways Chatham Dockyard scheme version, but that doesn't mean that I think it's a bad release. BA, again, core Gemini territory, straight through the throat, and again, it's been a rather underserved type. If I'm looking through the releases, yeah, there was a BA Chatham Dockyard A319 made just this year or last year for ARD by Air Classics, but it's not the same scheme. It's their previous version without the fly to serve crest. There was one of these made by Gemini all the way back in, I think it was 2014 or something like that. It was a long time ago anyway. And you've got to say, you know, it's well overdue. That mould was the old original Gemini mould as well. So I don't think it's even got rolling gear. It's so old. It's probably one of those ones which sat in the Gemini factory for ages before they actually got around to releasing it. So it's an underserved type, it's an underserved aircraft. It's only been released once before in this scheme. But at the same time, it's not the most exciting thing in the universe either. So I think for me, this one is probably going in, I would in a high flyer. I think it's going to do well. It's going to be a good release. Just not a release that particularly enthralls me personally. Now, releases that do enthrall me are 757s, and there are 3 this month, and they're not cargo aircraft, so they're going to be a lot more exciting from my perspective. The first pair represent NG models getting into Africa, a pair of Ethiopian Airlines 757s, one in the passenger scheme, which is registered ETAKF, and the other one is in the cargo scheme, ETAJS, I think. And I love the old Ethiopian scheme. It's such a classic scheme. It's so much colour. It's not like really anything else that's been worn by any other airline ever, probably, in terms of the way the tail flash with the flag's colours and the lightning bolt on the front with the lion. It looks great, and I'm sure that it'll look awesome on the NG Models 757 as well, which, as everybody knows, is a fantastic mould. So NG Models going to kick this one out of the park, I'm sure. The passenger one has to be supersonic. It's going to be an awesome model. And the freighter one, I don't collect freighters as much as I do passenger ones. It's perhaps not quite as exciting, but it's still really good. I think it's still a high flyer. So those look like really good 757s. And the third 757 is technically not NG, it's by Buchanan Models, but as we all know, that's really just a sub-brand, I think, of NG, so I'll include it here. And that represents an Air Tours 757, not in the original Air Tours colours, but in the second Air Tours colours, which are actually nicer probably than the original ones, which had a stylized A logo on the tail. This is GWJAN, and British charter 757s from the 90s. Hell yeah, that's exactly why I come to 400 scale for that kind of thing. Again, you can't go wrong. This is going to be awesome, and it's up there in supersonic category. Really impressive. And good to see, because it's been a while since we've seen some British charter 757s from that period of time. Originally, NG made quite a few. I've got several, Ambassador Air 2000, those kind of airlines, Britannia, but they haven't made any for a while, and there's still plenty to be done. So the next 5 releases all represent Boeing 787-9s. NG Models has got at least the joint best 787-9 mold on the market. Arguably the jcwings one is ever so slightly better, but only by a tiny margin if it is. And we'll start with a pair of Airlines 787-9s. We've got B1566 and B1357. The only difference between them is 1566 is carrying this very small BRICS National Summit sticker on its forward fuselage. It's so small you almost don't notice it, and I have to admit that I actually own a Gemin 787 from jcwings in this scheme with that logo on it, and I never ever noticed it had the logo until now, which is a disgrace on my part, but it just illustrates that the logo is so tiny. Yeah, it's really very, very small and almost imperceptible. You just don't notice it. So they're making both versions. Both of them have been made before by Phoenix and JC, as you imagine. And they're both going to be fine, you know. But I'm quite happy with the jcwings version I've got, which dates, I think, from 2017, so there's nothing dramatically going to be better than that in this one. So for those reasons alone, I think that these Gemin 787s are both going to be up there in the workhorse category. It's a nice livery, but at the same time, it's been made before, and there's nothing particularly new about it. Next, we've got another pair of Saudia 787s, and they've already made a couple of Saudia schemes. They made the standard colours, and they made one in the G20 special colours. It seems like Saudia are putting together a lot of special schemes nowadays. They announced the 75th anniversary one last month, I think, didn't they? And this month we've got another 2 HZARD, the Year of Arabic Calligraphy 2021, which, looking at the livery, is basically a selection of squiggles on the back of the plane, which actually do look quite nice. And the second scheme is on HZARB, and this one celebrates Riyadh by the look of things. And this one's quite colourful and has actually a different tail as well as colour on the rear fuselage. It's hard. It's hard for me to like Saudia, what the country and stands for, and the things it does. It's hard for me to like it. I don't know why I find it hard to like when I do China or North Korea, to be honest, but for some reason I do. And I don't think the Saudia base scheme really lends itself too well to special schemes, because you've got this kind of sand colour, which doesn't really lend itself to the additional special schemes, in my opinion. Neither of these are exciting me. They're both big, beautiful models, without a shadow of doubt. Interesting paint jobs, but yeah, don't like Saudi Arabia very much. And I don't really like the way the liveries have been merged with the standard scheme. So for me, these are both just workhorses as well. They're going to be good models. They're going to be nice, but yeah, I'm not going to be getting those. And the last 787, I also won't be getting, but I would if I had limitless funds, and that is a Norwegian Airlines long haul 7879, and this one's wearing the tail colours of Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of the rock band Queen. It's registered LNLNR. Yeah, the Norwegian scheme's always been interesting. That putting people's images on the tails is a nice idea. I'm not sure it's ever quite worked out for me the way that some of the other special schemes have. But I certainly don't like it as much as, say, Frontiers Animals and things. But I like the idea. And Freddie Mercury's a really cool guy to put on the tail. So yeah, it looks like a really nice combination. Looking through the Norwegian 787s that have been made to date, and there have been a few, but there haven't been hundreds, and they're kind of hit and miss in terms of who they're made by. So I'm looking at this. Phoenix have done a couple, for example, and I'm pretty sure that jcwings have probably done a couple as well, or Gemini, but there aren't large numbers of these, and this is the first time I believe that anyone has done Freddie Mercury on the tail, this particular aircraft. So good on NG for that. For me, this one makes it a high flyer because it's interesting personality to put on the tail, and the scheme itself is quite nice. It's a kind of a shame that Norwegian aren't really flying their 787s anymore. I quite like the livery. I like the way that it uses the Norwegian flag colours, even if it was always a bit weird having Norwegian operating from the UK or even Argentina. It seems to seem perverse, but nonetheless, yeah, high flyer for me, this one. Moving on, and there's a selection of Boeing 737-800s. Obviously, NG have got the best 738 in 400 scale, so there's not a lot of reason to talk about that. It's clearly going to be better than anyone else's, except baby pandas, but sometimes, Panda get the window line wrong and they just don't release much. So we've got a couple of Southwest Airlines versions here. It does seem like there have been hundreds of Southwest releases recently, and I'm a bit tired of them, but I don't collect Southwest, so I guess I can say that. But interestingly, when I look at how many 737-800s have been made for Southwest, there have only been 8 previous releases, and 4 of those are Gemini, 4 of them are NG. Only 2 are wearing the standard current livery, 1 from each Gemini and NG. I have to say, they look quite different. It looks like the Gemini ones got much darker colours, and I'm no expert here, but when I looked at the pictures, it did look like they were probably a bit too dark. But maybe the NG one's slightly too light. I don't know. But surely you're going to choose the NG mould over the jcwings one any day anyway. So these ones, they're not especially exciting from my perspective. One looks pretty much like a re-release. It's got the scimitar winglets on it, and the other one has got the standard blended winglets, but with no colour, just with grey winglets, which is a slightly odd combination, because you'd have thought they'd have made perhaps one with the Southwest winglet colours on, but they haven't. It does exist though in reality, this version with the grey winglets. Although neither of these releases really excite me that much, I think this is one of the times when I have to acknowledge that they're going to be super popular still. Southwest is a very popular airline. American collectors will be really keen on these, and there haven't been that many releases, as I said. So I'm tempted to make them workhorse, but I think they'll both be high flyers in terms of their sales potential, certainly, and they'll be good models. The next 3 models, however, are a nice diversion. We're going off to South America, and it is one of Brazil's better run carriers, GOL. And again, when you look, you might think that GOL is well represented in this scale. When you look through what's actually been made, there hasn't been a dramatic amount. There's quite a lot of Phoenix, most of which have got shocking cockpit windows, and obviously on that mediocre Phoenix mould. There's a single Gemini 800, and a much better Max, and there's a single, there's two Aero Classics Max versions as well. But when it comes to 800s, there's really, outside of some really horrible Phoenix versions, there's just this one Gemini, which again is on that rubbish mould really. And so it's good to see Gol get some representation from NG. It's good to see them moving to South America and having a look at what's to be made there. And the three versions we've got here have got the older Gol colours, or the older new Gol colours, shall we say, with a much wider separation between the two O's that make up the Gol in the titles, and the newer colours where the two O's are much more closely merged together. That looks a bit better actually, I think, that scheme. And then the third version is called, and I'm bound to say this incorrectly, Voa Canarinho, and relates to the aircraft that is used to transport the Brazilian national football team. Now these are all nice liveries. Gol has got a nice scheme without a shadow of a doubt, and the standard schemes are both nice. They're both very similar, obviously, as I say, just difference in the titling, but they're both really nice, and they're both deservedly going to be high flyers, I think. The other scheme, actually, I'm rather taken by. I had a look at this in close up. It's a really attractive scheme. You've got this bright yellow bird on the tail with the green background. You've got the Brazilian football crest on the tail, and you've got a football making up the nose, like in the same way that Lufthansa have done historically. And you've got bright yellow around the wing fuselage fairing. It looks really nice. And this model's going to be really, really attractive, I think. Again, it doesn't fit within my criteria whatsoever, but I can see this is going to be a delightful release, and for me, it edges this up into supersonic territory. Bringing us down to Earth again, though, somewhat, we've got a rather tedious release next, which is Qatar Airways 777-300. I've been a little bit underwhelmed by NG's 777 output so far. It's been a bit boring. And I'm not overly thrilled by the mould, I have to admit. It's their weakest major mould, and it's inferior, in my opinion, to the jcwings and Aviation 400 versions. So, put on a drastically, it's not even a word, put on a drastically boring livery like this all-white Cathay Pacific hybrid / retro, I've heard some people call it retro, scheme, which has already been announced by jcwings, already been produced by Phoenix. It's just the gas guzzler. It's boring. The mould isn't spectacular. It's not bad, but it's not spectacular. There's nothing really exciting about that one. And so, just 3 models to go, and those represent a new type for NG. One which there's only had a single release up to this point, though no one's actually seen any pictures of it yet, and that is the 737-600. So good to see NG producing 3 more 737-600s after last month's single announcement. And these show something which NG often do, which is producing variants of a scheme, even relatively unusual ones, and hybrids, which is a nice touch, though I admit that hybrid schemes rarely float my boat particularly. But having said that, I had been hoping for some Fly Globespan love. Fly Globespan is a carrier which has had no representation in 400 scale to date, as far as I'm aware, and it was a Scottish low-cost airline which operated for 6 years or so, between 2003 and 2009, and it operated a couple of 737-600s alongside a wider fleet of 737s and some 767s, and it had a really cool and nice scheme. Now there are 2 versions shown here. One is a hybrid scheme, which isn't particularly beautiful, I have to admit, when you compare it to the standard scheme. I don't think I'll be buying 2 Globespan 737-600s, so the one that I will be buying will not be the hybrid, but we do have the hybrid, which is registered GCDKD. It's perfectly fine, but for me it's going up there into the workhorse territory, because the scheme's, it's a hybrid scheme. It's not particularly exciting. It's not bad, but it's not great. Then we've got the standard colours, which are super nice. With this, one of the things I always liked about the glow span scheme is you've got this really cool belly, this red-orange belly, which has a nice curve to it and looks quite funky. And this aircraft is registered GCDRB, and this is the one I think I'll be getting. It's got the proper glow span tail, and it's got the proper title, it's got the proper belly, and it's the proper scheme, and it's a really good representation. And I'm really pleased to see that they are making it. So this one for me is up there in supersonic territory. That's a really cool airline. It's a unique airline, and it's in its full livery, so that's really good. And the last one is perhaps the most unusual release this month, one that nobody would guess. It's a hybrid that I wasn't even sure, existed, or perhaps I don't remember calling it out. And it's in the colours of Midwest Airlines, which sounds American, but very much isn't, and actually is an airline that was from Egypt and operated for actually quite a long time, 15 years or so. It's one of the many inclusive tour airlines that have operated from that region, and they leased this 737-600 from Globespan for a period. In fact, maybe they picked it up actually after Globespan went bust, and they only operated for a year or so, and it was registered SUMWC in their service. Now, it's carrying most of the Midwest scheme, and interestingly, Midwest had a scheme which is quite similar to that of Globespan in the colour of the tail and having big billboard titles, but it's still got the Globespan belly, which actually I think improves the Midwest scheme anyway. So this one's quite interesting in the sense like, hey, this is a really unusual airline. It's an opportunity that obviously NG have been able to take because they're already making the other Globespanners, and yeah, good on them. And actually, even though initially I thought, oh, why are they making that? Now I'm thinking, this is actually pretty cool. And if you're interested in catching slightly more unusual airlines to add to your fleet, then this is one that I think you'd like. It's also good to see some more African representation. So I'm going to move this one up into high flyer because that's a cool little airline, and one which nobody else is likely to be making in 400 scale anytime soon. Okay, cool. That is my thoughts on this month's NG models. As always, guys, what do you think? What are the models here which really stand out for you? Which ones are you going to collect? I think this is a month which is going to have very broad appeal because it's something for almost everybody. So, good work, NG. It looks like a bumper month, some really nice releases, and I'm looking forward to getting probably at least 5 of these. The ones that are sitting in supersonic there, minus the Gola one, which I can't come up with a reason to buy. Anyway, that's it for me now. So thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.